All right, well, welcome everyone. I am Kelly Yarbrough. I am the lead administrator of the Tallgrass Artist Residency Program. And I'm really thrilled that we have Ahimsa Timoteo Bodhrán joining us today. He is an artist in residence for the next not quite 10 days. Leslie Von Holten, who's also on the call, is actually also in residence at the same time. So that's that doesn't always happen with our residents lining up this way, but it's really lovely when folks can spend some time together. Just quickly, for those of you who may not know, the Tallgrass Artist Residency is based in Matfield Green, Kansas, population of about 50 to 60, right, Bill? Somewhere around there. It's a very small community in Chase County, Kansas. And the residency program invites 8 to 10 artists from across the country and especially from the Prairie region to the community throughout the summer months. To have sort of shorter residency periods that they get to pursue their own research and time as they would like. And then we have all of the residents from this year's cycle back to town in the fall for a gathering and artist talks, group exhibition, and some good community time. So that's kind of how we run the residency. I know Ahimsa has done quite a number of different residencies, and that's one thing that I hope we'll get to talk about later on is experience with some of those residencies. But we're going to today to hear a little bit from Ahimsa first about his experience and his work, and then we will have a Q&A dialogue with all of you. So we'll open it up for questions and conversation later on. Before I introduce Ahimsa, I do want to acknowledge that I am calling in from Manhattan, Kansas, which is about an hour and a half north of Matfield Green, Kansas, but we're in a similar Flint Hills ecoregion. But this region has been cared for by people for many thousands of years before white European settler colonization. There are currently 4 federally recognized tribes in the state of Kansas. Those are the Prairie Band of Potawatomi, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, Kickapoo Nation, and the Sac and Fox Nation. But there are many more known indigenous communities that have cared for this land, called it home, sacred grounds, hunting grounds for many years. And some of those include the Kaw, the Osage, the Sioux, Kiowa, Wichita, among many others. So I do want to acknowledge our forebears here. And I hope that we can learn more about Ahimsa's practice with indigenous communities as well, and lifting up indigenous voices. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ahimsa Timoteo Bodhrán is a multimedia artist, activist, organizer, critic, and educator. He was a Tulsa Artist Fellow in 2019, as well as a National Endowment for the Arts Fellow. He has been a collaborator and curator of many projects across the globe, including a movement research studies project titled Decolonial Design, Indigenous Choreography, and Multicorporeal Sovereignties, a womanist, queer, trans, indigenous movement dialogue. He is also a founder of the First Transgender Film Festival, and his work appears in many publications, including Troubling the Line, Trans and Genderqueer Poetry and Poetics. I want to give a warm welcome to Ahimsa. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for having me be here today, and thank you everyone who's watching this live and later in recording. It's an honor to be here at the intersection of Osage, Kansas, and Kiowa territories, and I do want to acknowledge the 4 federally recognized tribes: the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, the Kickapoo Tribe in Kansas, Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation, and Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri and Kansas. And I also want to recognize because I'm based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, Muskogee Creek Nation, Osage Nation, and Cherokee Nation, because it's a tri-tribal intersection within the boundaries of Tulsa, whose sovereignty was reaffirmed in the McGirt decision at the federal level in the Supreme Court a few years ago, and also the 49 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma as a whole. So it's good to be here today. I sometimes talk about my work, sometimes I share aspects of that work. Today, I'm going to actually dive in by sharing 2 video clips, and these videos are a combination of both my visual art and my written work. So rather than contextualize them to a large extent, I'm going to just share them. What I will say is that a lot of my work, both as a solo and as a collaborative artist, and deals with ecological realities, whether those are in more rural places, such as here in the Flint Hills. Like over the last 2 days, I was at the Tallgrass Prairie National Preserve and also Chase County Fishing Lake. So to both be on the land in the various ecosystems, as well as in the waters here, has been really beautiful. And I also want to give a thanks to Francesca Alcantara, who's a dear friend of mine, who's also here in residence with me during this time, who's also based in Tulsa. And so it's an honor to be here with you all. So the first video clip I'm going to share weaves in, it's a video montage of painting on canvas, an acrylic painting, as well as a poetic piece. And then the second one that I'll be sharing after that, I'll describe a little more right before I show it. So, so I'm going to share screen, and then, yeah. And Kelly, if you could let me know via text if something is not working, otherwise we're assuming it's working. And just for folk who are watching this, the first video is going to be a video, but the images themselves are still images. So each still image is going to be on the screen for a few seconds. Your video is working fine. It is not frozen. As long as you still hear words, in a certain number of seconds, the video will shift to another still image, and that's how that first video works. So it's not going to be moving as much, but a succession of still images. Okay. Okay. Cool. So the first clip that I'm showing is from, it was commissioned for a screening for a film series for the National Queer Arts Festival. And it is for Janine Moghanim, who's a queer Palestinian artist, librarian, and organizer in the Bay Area. She envisioned a queer and trans Arab futures event. And so she invited different queer and trans Arab artists to create videos and to imagine what our futures might be like. So this takes sort of eco-poetics and thinks about on more of a cosmic or celestial level, and what would it mean for, since so much of our work is very critical in a variety of ways, what would it mean to, I took the invite as what would it mean to envision a really positive, possible future. So I'll share this here. Emissaries from the Arab world envision a queer trans Arab multiverse. 1. Continually folding, expanding, we tesseract, we multiply and permutate. There are floodings of fluids. The way gas expands, we ignite. We are plasma of blood pulsing and stars igniting themselves in night sky. Our darkness is infinite. We are matter and energy immeasurable by white standards. There are new observatories for us to see ourselves. We look backwards and forwards in space-time. We are new astronomers reshaping astrolabes to chart ancient seas. How deep our water is, salty, brackish, fresh, chlorine. We are all the elements on the chart tessellating, periods pulsing, becoming semicolons,
slipping into commas, convulsing into ellipses. So many ovular orbits we synchronize. Our syntax shakes systems, supernovae. There are nuclear reactions, fission and fusion, stray electrons, neutrinos shooting through planets, across galaxies, gravitons. I am seeking you, soulmate, across echoes, black holes, ejecta. Perhaps in this galaxy or universe you are not, but you are traversing planes to reach me. I wait for you in the future and in the past. There is such a presence here. I feel you across nebulae, arteries red-shifting the blueprints of our alveoli, re-oxygenated galactic filaments, plural walls, souls supercluster around each other beyond binary. We circle each other's paths. So many comets entering and leaving our systems, burning and icing cycles, venting and sealing intrastellar seed vaults. Some trace memory of what we were that we might become again. Such cosmic dust and ash, vestigial, swirling. 2. All these stars are ours, so named, as if we belong to them. Familial, as if our destinies are already consecrated, constellated in the systems we visited before we came here, before we, many-vesseled, birthed from waters, primordial, pre- and post-human, these humidities, these wetnesses within and between our flesh, our desires ever darkening, illuminating infinite, our skins radiantly reflective of rainbows our irises can't register yet, so ultraviolet, infrared, heat and hearing, scored and searing, micro and radio waved, X and gamma rayed, our genders galloping, unbound, recombinant, glistening in our resurgent tetrachromacies. I want to feel you fully unbridled in all my matrilineal senses, the scent of you, your lightning, lingering after storm, taste and touch thunderclap, my body recovering, hold me holding you upright, rebalance my proprioception, echolocate these emissions, nocturnal, the electricity between us lights up the dark, static, somatic, we see each other in glimpses, know each other through brief embraces, trace back in blood all that we were before. 3. Our peoples everywhere are Arabness in all peoples, our world a cosmos, most of us knowing our sacred geometries, how we tensile textured fit, tectonic tantalize, geodesic each sphere ensconced within another, our deep down cores pulsing, metallic, liquid, sublimating with callous satisfaction, such succulent subduction zones, mantles of muddled masculinity and femininity writhing, rolling over each other, proof all things melt in queer desire. That proximal magmatic, red-black, crisp crucibled, glowing, bioluminescent, our internal and external navigations, limitless, fractal, frenetic, deca-hectokilo, mega-giga-tera, peta-exa-zeta, yada, deci-centi-milli, micro-nano-pico, femto-atto-zepto, yocto, gracious grams of gratitude, luscious liters leaking, muscled meters massaged, sultry seconds sucked, radiance of appreciative apertures agape, dilated degrees pushed past absolute zero towards absolute heat, jewels jangling in our celestial crowns. How immense, how infinitesimal. We exist within each other, engulf. We intersect at right angles, acutely flex, canine clench and feline stretch, scissor flakes of folded paper burnt to bone, snow misting into flame, hexagonal, octahedral, our inner chambers and outdoor cathedrals, interfaith congregant full, walls of stone a-sweat, concentric and interlocking, grinding, re-rendered tumbler smooth, slurried, rippling, voraciously veined, arboreal arabesque, vines of verdant vestiture and lace, hollowed hearth, breath upon breath between species, conversant in cubics we grid, four-dimensional, form heavenly configurations, murmurations of symbiosis, each swirl and dot, wave and particle, quantum these calligraphied skins shed and rebed, bred, quills quivering re-inked, re-weld, rethinked, cartographies of cursives relinked, elementary these educations, ancient untaught discursives, now subversive, rescript, every ursine sleeper cell awoken, each exonymed expletive re and declaimed, reenacted, counteracted, teleplayed in radio waves, only now reaching us. Every system pre and post this one of writing, speaking, glyphs that glottal, trilled tongues, never stop, hieroglyph and cuneiform, alphabet and abugida, abjad and syllabary, logographies, multilabial, this tongue lapping, committing cellular to memory, mitochondrial, miraculously multiple, a mutant, pendulous sways, forest of cherry stems, multi-generational, migratory, our ululation, uvula in perpetual motion, our fingers a blur of hummingbird wings, whipping a whistle register. 4. Centuries from now, millennia, indigo and golden houred, meteor showered, we will be gathering cedar, beating shells, plaiting sweetgrass, tying tobacco, chipping obsidian, smithing silver. None of this is new, us being on each other's shores, beneath dual moons, in each other's bloodlines, our tongues twinned in each other's mouths, fingers 6 or more, and laced. Across many terrains we will carry this message. We have always been travelers. We have always left sand in each other's jeans.
And then I'm going to share the next video, which is more of a video engagement with a canvas work. So a painting in progress that is also overlaid with a poetic prose piece that engages Indigenous and Arab and other intersectional Latinx and other intersectional realities in New York City. I'm originally from the South Bronx. I'm fourth generation South Bronx, and my family goes back to at least the 1860s in New York City. So that's where the various strands of my family come together.
Ahimsa Timoteo Barón, Archipelago, or what I think when I say Bronx. Old growth forests, what I think when I say Bronx. Running in the hills, a park corded land, where we flee, blood in the water. We'll be given a varsity letter for this, perhaps a jacket. The winters that grew colder. I can tell you the places where we were not cut down. I will not. Mother always brought me to trees, water. How did she remember this here, this never forgetting, with machete in hand? Immune to ivy, she burns what she's harvested. By hand, I reach out my hand to feel cedar. I share. An Iranian laughs at this. An Arab laughs at me when I say there are Indians here more than anywhere. How many of my people laugh at my people? Most likely ancestors of mine killed ancestors of mine. Kill still the blood. It goes always. Always? Military dependence, no conflict in the blood, photo ID to prove it, bases exchange, lines proceeding back and forth across the water, land, mine, how we leave the place of forest, trees still remember, mother heads north, takes me with her. The women travel home, the men they die, in wars here and over there wherever presidents, congresses decided to be, here whenever we're determined, the enemy, mine, machines and legs splayed open, the women, children die too, ill from labor. It was not for lack of medicine, one of four, the hypocritical in the oath, not covered in olives. If I extend this tree to you, is it recognizable? There is more than one occupation, hallowed, hollowed out ground. Perhaps grave markers, perhaps no markings on this map, no gate before the cemetery, still we visit, tobacco on the ground as evidence, but you wouldn't recognize that, would you? Stream heading south, flecked with leaves, limbs broken, bow before bow stretched, bow before breaking. Target cradle this ship docked in our port, weeks of fleets, we extend endless hospitality, the expectation. She laughs at my hand holding branch, her home I never return to, her child I never see, that branch I do not hold. Endless uniforms on our shores, service the squadron, marshal the marital laws. What they refuse to give, we refuse to give others. Balm, tonic, some remedy or serum, salve, elixir, only liquid or paste. Does the doctor recognize? Physician, there are other laws of science, walking right past the sage, fields of grass, sweet, weavable. So much of our medicine is fire, braided bodies, assemble your troops. You withhold medicine, doctor, from your patients. Medics sent into the field, how they care not for our sick, not the fields either, lead leaching into soil, core allegiance. There are places where things still grow. Yes, in this place with bricks, filled with millions, battalions, could show you, could take you across troubled land, troubled water, show you a respite we were not shown, offer cool water from the ones still fevered, how to reconcile with you on this land you are paid to be, the one my people are forced to leave, endless greeting to your arrival as we depart this earth, this small place we gather against. Would I take you into the woods, show stone, show the places we gather, the place of calm waters, no ships, the places our songs come from, the place inside, besides the brambles, bricks, past the stickers and thorns, porn parlors, the place my mother hacked to, the place I am still going, this never forgetting, who laid the path, walks with. Sometimes we stop sharing gifts, surfacing stories locked deep within, not because they are horrid, but because they are beautiful, and we do not wish them to become horrible. In your eyes, perhaps some recognition, cognition, perhaps a spark, grasp. Regardless of your touch, I still reach out to trees, stop when I see cedar, immigrants, kin, invasive species, notwithstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ahimsa. Were you going to share any more, or was that sort of the kicking off point of the dialogue?
Yeah, that's basically the kicking off for the dialogue. I feel like there's a lot of ways in which we can talk about our work as
Yeah.
artists, and knowing that there are people here, I'd really like to, beginning with you and then opening up to others for dialogue.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Well, I think I might, so I have questions, but I want to open it up to everyone to chat, but I might just start off by asking, so I know you just arrived yesterday, so I know this is at the very beginning of your time in Matfield Green, but do you have any first impressions or questions or sticky ideas that hit you when you arrived in town?
So I mentioned Francesca Alcantara, a dear friend of mine who's traveled with me to the residency, who I'm deeply honored to be here with. I feel so much of my engagement of places is in relation to community. So one of the jokes I make about when I moved or was getting ready to move to Oklahoma was that I felt there was a range of reactions. So I don't want to break it down to a binary, but if there were poles on the ends of those reactions, there was those folk who really either were not native or didn't know native realities or didn't know Oklahoma or this part of the country, or a million different sets of intersections, not all the same, but there's some, congruences. And those people were like, why are you going to Oklahoma? Why would you go there? And also I'm from New York and I've lived on the West Coast. I've lived in Michigan, I've lived other places, but definitely like a lot of folk who've lived in larger cities, maybe on the coast, were sort of like, why are you doing this? And then I had total opposite reaction from Native folk, from other folk who live in community with Native people and or have connections in the region. And there are so many different communities of color and diverse histories of resistance and organizing and creativity in the region. And we're like, oh, that's amazing. Oklahoma is such a hub. There's so much going on. Tulsa is, oh my goodness, like just this total enthusiasm and seeing this as a crossroads, a possibility. And I feel that kind of, even if that I was talking about Oklahoma, I think that's true of any place in this world. Any place has a wealth of peoples, of trains going by. Literally, I could show that the train is going by right here at the dwelling. There are so many things that are beautiful, that are particular, that are challenging, that are difficult, that are worthy of engagement wherever we are in the world. And I think for me, coming here, traveling with my friend, Francesca, we were both in the entire car ride, 3.5 hours up here from Tulsa, engaging things tied to Tulsa, tied to Oklahoma, tied to, we're both, been based in New York prior, and still, and then thinking about where we're going. And so for me, I was knowing, and Francesca as well, like knowing like different tribal territories that we were passing through as we were driving from Tulsa up here, and thinking about particular histories here. So I think part of it, in addition to reacting to the place and the peoples here, was just that sort of, I think when we have a generosity of spirit and that we are engaged with the world and expecting to see wonder, to make connections, to see richness, you're more likely to experience it. So I think I want to start there because I think there's a lot of reduction that occurs in these notions of flyover states or other things. And it's like, you're missing out on the opportunity to connect with wonderful peoples, wonderful histories, challenging, complex realities. So that said, I'll say one of the things that was beautiful coming here, since I'd seen photos, but it's different when you engage a place, was the lushness of the landscape and the variations in landscape. And because I wasn't sure if we would be seeing nothing but tall grass, but seeing such a wide range of different plants and animals in the landscape. And also to see the variations in topography when we were seeing like more creek beds, when we were seeing more hills, and then going around here, and just all the beautiful wildflowers that are currently in bloom, and the plants that seem very vibrant, I think from recent rains. So going here, going into some local creeks, then going over the last 2 days up to Chase County's fishing lake. We've been there twice now. And also yesterday to the Tallgrass Prairie National Preserve and be able to walk around that and seeing also there, we only took one path. We're going to revisit, but one path that took us through grasslands and then back up through a little bit of forest coming back. We also saw a quilt display. So to think about the textile histories here in the plains. So yeah, I don't know if I have specific things, but more just that richness that I feel needs to be honored in the local. And that shows those connectivities wherever we go.
Thank you. Well, I want to open it up if anyone has questions or comments. I see Sean's got his hand raised, so why don't you go first, Sean?
Ready to go. I was really inspired by your presentation there, and so thank you, Ahimsa, for that generous sharing of your work, and also what you've already said about being rooted in place. I related to what you said about coming from New York, and I had a similar reaction moving here. People often said, why are you moving there? And it's there's a deep sadness, I think, in that relationship, especially for me, like with people that I love and respect, but who perhaps haven't who cast off places for those reasons that we develop, and we have a lot of repair to do. You might agree. So I wanted to talk about or ask you about your writing in the first piece with queer and trans Arab futures. And there was a moment that really caught me and made me pay attention so much, so closely to the text. And well, it said slipping into commas, and there was this thing that was happening. And so to me, commas became comas because I was reading it at the same time. And so there was so much slippage that started to happen in the writing. And as you were writing about the galaxy universe, and using like really, really large terms, and then kind of telescoping inward and outward and moving in between, that slippage that was happening in the language just got really, really curious, and part of that queer futurity, to me, certainly. So I think I wanted to ask just about that, and maybe about your writing practice, and what writing and visual art do for you and as a combined practice, and how that imagery created through writing offered a lot for me, just in that piece, the way you were speaking it, what was happening as you were speaking it, the staccato of the words, or this prefix list. And there was this like breaking open that started to happen with language, where I wanted to start hearing like really de-anthropomorphized terms. And because at some point you said something about, let's see, rainbows, our irises can't register yet. So I went to this place where, of course, like, we can't see the colors that birds can see. And I think about that all the time. So there was a lot of beautiful, like, being on the edge of knowing and knowability, but, we're stuck in language. So I want to get your thoughts on that, and to understand more about how you relate to those aspects of practice.
I didn't realize I was still muted. Thank you. That was a really rich engagement and very generous. Thank you. As a small child growing up, I was fascinated in the small. And I was also, as the youngest of all my cousins, keenly aware of what would not be my pathways forward because of the various glowing examples of what not to do from other family members. Like, I'll be like, oh, the car's on fire. I don't think I ever want that to happen, or just whatever it was. Or just like when we got a microwave, being like, let's see what a microwave can do. And I'm like, no, it is only for the cooking of food. What are these experiments with fire and, metallic Crayola crayons? I was like, I was not interested in joining the endless, and I'm joking about, there's very intense realities that I emerged from, but I was like, I don't want to be in the hospital like so many various relatives for a dazzling variety of reasons that where our lives were in jeopardy. And I'm like, so there was a way in which I was so not interested in climbing trees. I was like, the tree is beautiful by itself. I can hug it, but I do not need to be with our limited health insurance falling from it. So like there was a way in which I was very much interested in very peacefully observing the world. And it doesn't mean that I don't have an active engagement with it, I do, but there was this way in which I really just appreciated listening to things, to watching things, to if it was snow, like I'm from New York City and then I graduated high school in the Hudson Valley near West Point Military Academy. And whether it was urban or rural, like the ways in which the small fascinated me. I loved one of my earliest memories of creating visual arts, not the first one, but years later, was just like sitting down, laying and like drawing blades of grass, and little bits of clover, and just really being interested in those details. And I think whatever mediums that we work in, and or whether we're artists or people who just love the sensual world of hearing and taste and touch, is like, what does it mean when we think about what's that first experience of texture or acidity when we put something in our mouth, or even smell it prior, like the smell of a beautiful peach before, and the fuzziness of the down before we then cut into it, and the way in which each fruit slices differently, and then when you get to taste it, and then the aftertaste. And I think whether it's taste, whether it's smell, whether it's touch, and the textual or listening, I don't reduce it to me being a Taurus, but supposedly Tauruses love the senses, and you're a Taurus as well, okay? And I think there's something about allowing yourself to dwell in the small. And then there was also a way, both in terms of being a small child and looking out a much larger world, as well as feeling with total love for all the people who raised me, like feeling trapped in many ways and wanting to get out into this larger world, wanting to, like the TV show Fame, get out there and be a performing artist or whatever it might be, and connect with others. And so I've always also been fascinated by the stars, fascinated by not just the micro, but the macro. And so I think for me, I'll share one last thing, is that when I wrote that piece and created the video, those all occurred in 3 days after I emerged from the hospital. So I'm about a year and a half out of having survived heart failure, and where I nearly left this world. So this is what I consider my second life. And I had basically nearly worked myself to death organizing for social justice in 2020 into early 2021, both in terms of electoral things, what occurred in Minneapolis in late May, may that brother rest in peace, and in terms of George Floyd, and the various ways in which like our various movements had to really critically examine and intensify the work we were doing in terms of anti-Black racism and racial justice and police brutality in general, and various intersections. And so for me, I'd already been pulling 16 to 20-hour days. And then when George Floyd was murdered, may he rest in peace, I was a part of various national collectives. And I was like, where do I take this additional time when I'm already have no time? And I started pulling all-nighters, and then Trump came to town, was going to be the first stop on his organizing campaign. And that's when I started experiencing insomnia for the first time in my life. And then that occurred to like 9 months of insomnia while organizing beyond belief for the elections, and then up through January through the attempted overthrow of the government, and then up through inauguration. It wasn't until inauguration day that I finally felt I could breathe. And that's when my body started completely breaking down. Like it finally could stop, and it did. And thankfully I was able to receive amazing medical care and be with you all today. And the reason why I bring that context up is in that piece that I read and that I created the video for in a few days, I basically, the Jeannie Moganim, the queer Palestinian artist, organizer, librarian who invited me to create something, she kept on extending the deadline. She's like, I know you've going through a lot. I just want to provide as love as support. And then she had a final deadline. And so I produced it within 3 days after emerging from the hospital. So a lot of the language in that piece and the images that I selected have this interiority because there are things of me literally learning how to walk again, learning how to breathe again, learning how to be able to touch various parts of my body that I had not had access to for many months just due to how disabled I'd become. So I think that interior and exteriority has always been a part of my work, and it definitely was in that post-emergence from the hospital. And so I was very grateful for the way, the last thing I'll say is very grateful for the way we hold space for each other and create space for creativity, particularly in times of tremendous struggle. And that whenever we can provide that grace for each other through a residency, through an extension of a deadline, through bringing food over to someone who's working so much, and or those loving check-ins, like there were various people like Francesca. Francesca took me to the emergency room when I was having heart failure. So if anyone wants to blame me later in life for still being on Earth, you have to blame Francesca, because she's one of the reasons that I'm here. So just thinking about how none of us are alone and how each of our lives are made possible through those who care for us.
Leslie, I see your hand raised.
All right, thank you. Ahimsa, they're like Sean's reaction, there's just so much that you presented to us, and just like all the synapses are firing. So thank you. And so I guess this will shape up into a question, but something that really struck me was the sensuousness of your, not only what you're writing about and the body, but also the word choices that you're using. And Sean used the term slippage, which I think was great. I guess what I am curious about is, you clearly are a person of many, many passions and strong feelings. So I'm curious what your path was to channeling that into being an artist. Because I don't know if I'm making an assumption, but I feel like you're not from a family of artists by a little bit of what you've talked about, and I may be wrong there, but so how did you get on this path, and how were you sort of strengthened by that community that you've referred to?
Thank you. That's a very lovely opening question and then deep engagement. One of the things that's interesting is when you grow up within extended families and you realize that each of you is a different part of the story, and that each of you may have different experiential knowledges of a place, a people, a time period. And in my family, one of the things, since I was raised by my three mothers, my mother, my grandmother, my godmother, and my dad was president. They were very happily married until my mom passed away. May she rest in peace. Like over 44 years of marriage. With that, like, it was really deep for me, especially since my brothers are older. I'm the youngest of all my cousins. Is they had more time, 9.5 and 11 years more time with my mom than I did. So it really blew me away in dialogues with them when they didn't know certain things about my mom. And I was like, how did you not know that she wanted to be a singer and artist? I mean, she had a mezzo-soprano voice as a teenager and really wanted to pursue that. And then with the tobacco industry's marketing, in the 1950s in the Bronx and elsewhere, started smoking 2 packs of Pall Mall unfiltered, became a very deep voice, a very changed voice, and being a manual laborer as a waitress and factory worker throughout her life. Her opportunities to pursue music in that way and or to pursue visual art, which she also had a tremendous interest in, were tremendously diminished or challenged. And so one of the things that she did was create, in sometimes, I don't want to say simple because they weren't, like in very contested realities, opportunities for creativity, both for myself, for herself, for others around her. So she was always, there's this beautiful piece by Alice Walker, In Search of Her Mother's Gardens, which is also the title of a book that she wrote. And one of the things that Alice Walker raises in that is a question of what happened to Black women artists during slavery and Reconstruction. Where did Black women's creativity go during times of tremendous oppression, when they may not have had access to a lot of the artistic materials that were deemed legible or recognizable? And we've seen this from various other oppressed communities, analyzing what does it mean to recognize creativity and creative resistance in places where the materiality or the modes of expression might be invisibilized to those who are only looking for dominant forms of creativity. So my mom always was rearranging the furniture. My mom, hand sewed most of our clothes, created our clothes when we were very small children, particularly my brothers. She made quilts. She did pursue some artistic things. She loved Bob Ross. Later, when she retired, she was able to pursue some painting, really got into wood carving. She's carved multiple wooden birds before she had passed away and painted them. Really beautiful, intricate work. And for me, she engaged on a level of art, and I got in trouble for it. Like, I'm in my first grade and I was reading, grade levels above my grade level, and also in math and stuff. And so I was the child not trying to cause trouble, but not wanting to support lies that I was here. And I saw them as an ethical issue. And so when the teacher said you can only subtract smaller numbers from larger numbers, and I was like, they're like, you can only subtract 3 from 5, not 5 from 3. And I was like, -2. And they were like, shh, they're not ready for that. And I almost got sent to the principal's office. And then I was sent to the principal's office when, in the same year in first grade, their teacher was talking about coloring, and they was talking about black and white. And I said, black and white aren't colors, they're tints. They make other colors lighter or darker. And the teacher was like, you are a problem. You are always asking questions. You're a distraction. Sent me to the principal. My mom had to take off from work, come in with an art book and show the teacher that I was right. And there was multiple times where my mom had to intervene. Sometimes were much more serious or dangerous situations. So there's a way in which I want to really honor that creativity and that commitment to creativity and to children's imagination, and also say, yeah, it wasn't necessarily a given path in so many ways. And things that helped make my life possible were Alice Walker's work. I was not assigned Alice Walker's work. She was the first woman of color, person of color, Native person, Black person, queer person, mixed race person that I read. And I just happened to come across her book in a bookstore. And I saw it before I saw the movie, The Color Purple, and then reading her poetry, prose, both fiction and nonfiction, was transformative and provided a path by seeing what was her pathway into art and an artistic life. And then coming across later, again, never assigned, the work of other sisters from This Bridge Called My Back, the first women of color anthology in US history, that came out in 1981. And then that being a pathway to so many other authors, and meeting other people doing work in performance, meeting other people doing visual art, sound. And then very much I feel like my training, even though I later had training elsewhere, was very much through community, was very much by meeting people, getting to know them. And I'm deeply grateful for that tutelage, for that mentoring. And it's a mentoring that I sought out because I was really hungry for creative pathways forward, and to know that a creative life, including perhaps as your main profession that you do in this world, were possible. And it wasn't until probably about I'm trying to think about how many years back, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago was when I became a full-time artist. But it was slowly and incremental, and it wasn't until there was a series of things that led in that direction, but it wasn't until a Haudenosaunee performance artist, Rosie Simas, gave me the opportunity to work with her on a much more regular basis, that I was able to work with her in terms of her Seneca womanist multimedia dance work. And we'd already been friends, but when I started, and it helped her on different projects, but when I was able to begin working with her in a more paid kind of way, that and other things, I was able to finally piece together a full-time artist life. So I'm deeply grateful for the space that she made for me. And we were able to continue working together for multiple years on different projects. And then thankfully through the fellowships, both the Tulsa Artist Fellowship and the National Endowment for the Arts, those also made my life much more possible in huge ways. So I'm deeply grateful for them as well.
Do you have any other questions?
I'd actually like to tag on something else that was really important that I forgot to mention. Super brief. So there are multiple people who are dear to me today who are here. I'm seeing also my friends Nancy Y. Kim and Kem Ike and Jehan Mullen, and deeply grateful for the community of artists and theorists and critics of color who are out there, particularly women of color, queer trans folk of color, Indigenous artists who and critics and educators who are doing really important work. And I particularly want to acknowledge Nancy Y. Kim, who's an amazing visual artist. We met back at Vermont Studio Center back almost 10 years ago. And being there at that particular residency, I've done other residencies starting maybe 2 years prior, but being there was like, at the time, it was the largest artist residency in the country, 50 to 60 people. And there was a critical mass of about 11 of us that are artists of color, and Nancy Kim being one of them. And being there and seeing these delicious illuminated slide talks at night and being able to spend till 2 in the morning in someone's studio. And because there were so many folk, it wasn't just one of each, like one visual artist, one musician, one writer, one choreographer. And so since there was multiple people in multiple disciplines, you could spend 3 days hanging out with a bunch of sculptors and talk about their compositional methodologies. How do they disassemble this 20-foot sculpture and put it into like someone's 3 different cars going to 3 cities to be reassembled after it's in? Can I put it in your mom's garage in Philly because I've got a show in Baltimore? So to see how sculptors worked and built community and also like all these things it just had all my synapses firing. And up until that point, I had primarily, even though I had training in dance and writing and other areas, and visual art and sound, I had mostly circulated as a writing-based artist, and I still am. And from there, I really wanted to pursue what I was calling non-writerly means of producing written text. So to see how through visual or performative or sonic or terrestrial approaches, I could get at different text in different ways. Instead of just writing about my mom's body as a working class woman, as a manual labor, if I were to do repetitive gestures, even if it's a small sample of what the lifetime of her body did, maybe that would get me into understanding and writing about that in a different way. And then shortly after that, I realized I really just wanted to work in those other media as well, just for themselves. So it wasn't just painting in acrylic to get that text, it was because acrylic and working on canvas and the range of visualities and the way that light and opacity and translucency work and all the different things that we love, the range of motions, the figurative and abstract aspects of things, the way different canvas works are in conversation with each other as you work over time. So I think for me, I want to really honor that residency and that community of folk, and the people since then, some of who've been here today who've really nurtured that. Because when someone is like, hey, I've mostly been a sound artist and now I'm wanting to like work with visuality in relation to sound or whatever ways we're trying to expand, when people joyfully greet that and support you and talk to you for hours and show you things, that's such a generous thing that enables our work and our lives. So I'm deeply grateful for Nancy and our cohort at that time.
Thank you, Ahimsa. I have one more question if you're okay with one more. Well, I have a lot more questions, but I'm just going to ask the one. So clearly from what you've talked about here today and what I've seen of your work, you're very highly collaborative, work across media. You seem to be really bold in incorporating new media and exploring and being expansive in that media. I came across a presentation that you did, a performance that was on Zoom. It was curated on Zoom, I think in 2020. So it was during kind of the height of the pandemic. And you were working on a painting while two other dancers or movement artists were moving. And also I think there was some verbal text in the background too. And so I guess I have kind of a two-part question. I'm curious to know just your philosophy in embracing new media, how you encounter new media and start incorporating it into your practice. And then also in that particular experience, what was it like to sort of curate and coordinate this performance on Zoom? And moving forward, do you see that as part of your practice, or how do you see the Zoom world remaining as part of your practice moving forward? Oh, you're still muted. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a really amazing experience. I have been approached by two different nonprofit organizations, or one a local arts sort of amplifier, and then a local part of the library system, Latinx unit thereof. And I was, they had approached me to do some kind of work. They were really open. And one of the things I'm really committed to is wherever I am, focusing upon following and amplifying the voices of local diverse artists in that place, because I am a newcomer to a territory, and it's important that I follow the leadership and support the voices of those people who are there, whether I'm there for a week or whether I am there for longer. So for example, being here in Kansas, one of the things that was important for me in terms of promo of this, not only event, but the residency, was really reaching out to people who are within the prairie territories. And so looking at the map that's on the website and thinking about the range of historical prairie territories, reaching out to people from Texas up through, various parts of the plains across different states, and reaching out to those folk in particular, not just about my event, but so they'd know this exists and that they're eligible to apply. And because there's higher concentrations of artist residencies in certain parts of the country. And I think for a place such as Matfield Green, where I'm at right now, for people that are relatively close and part of this larger set of intersecting ecosystems, to know that there's a place that they could come and work and dwell in place and in community and creativity, I think is really important. So for me, working on that piece was an opportunity to bring additional focus to different artists who were local there. And one of the people was Jose Manuel Vega, who is a queer Mexican community organizer and singer. So we had some of his songs woven in. There was also Wilena Cuitan and Yvette Wiley, who are both working at this intersection of arts and community. Wilena has been a curator at the First Americans Museum and done a variety of work, which is the new Native Museum that opened up this past year in Oklahoma City area, and also has a background in dance. And then Yvette Wiley, who is an environmental scientist and does a lot of work with tribal communities in terms of environmental and health and other intersectional issues, and is also a poet and a person in dance. And so one of the things that's important for me is wherever I am, if I'm doing anything tied to dance, is creating opportunities for those who are local dancers, whether they're currently moving in the dance world, or people such as Elena and Yvette, who had previously circulated much more in dance world and are still amazing movement artists, and to create opportunities for folk to be able to share their passions. And oftentimes people who are doing critical work or curatorial work or nonprofit work or scientific work, they may still have these vibrant creative aspects of themselves and they engage, and we know that, but how often do we get a chance to see them sharing their own creativity? So I was very much interested in creating that piece in the midst of the pandemic as a way of the piece, which is called Post Chrysalidas, sort of post chrysalises, was looking at multiple things in terms of potential monarch butterfly migrations, both in terms of the actual monarchs, as well as the monarchs as a symbol for both undocumented folks, for queer trans folks, for Latinx and indigenous diasporas. So to bring together indigenous and Latinx artists from the Tulsa area, working in visual, sound, performance, and text, which included some of my work too, both in terms of painting and written text, and to just layer those and for us to respond to each other in the moment felt a way of exploring what was also another meaning of post chrysalises, post chrysalidas, which was what would it mean for us to envision a post-pandemic world where we could then be in contact with each other. And oftentimes the chrysalis is a point of turning inward, which a lot of us were doing at that time, and then, you know, to become some butterflies in the future. So what would it mean to have connectivities and mobility in a peri-pandemic or post-pandemic world?
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Oh, Bill, I see you talking, but I can't hear you. Oh, still can't hear you for some reason. It might be a sound setting. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you type it in the chat? No. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to connect with the Ahimsa in person, right?
Yeah. It might have been when you entered Zoom, maybe need to click that audio box. So if you left for a second and came back in and clicked the audio box, we could maybe hear you then. Or as Kelly mentioned, maybe put your thing in the chat, but otherwise we can just connect. I'm a few feet away from you.
Yeah. Well, unless anyone else has more questions, I might say a few words to wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I will say, so there's a couple of events coming up this week that you all should be aware of. So Leslie Von Holten is, like I mentioned at the beginning, is currently in residence as well. And she will also be giving a Zoom talk this Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Time. So if you're able to join us for that, please do. Also, if you happen to be in Kansas, in the area, this coming Saturday, September 10th, there's another group in town called Matfield Green Works, which Bill is sporting a t-shirt for. And they, yes, there it is. They're organizing sort of community-wide events throughout the day that are all free and open to the public. So if you're around and able to join, I encourage you to come out. And Leslie and Ahimsa, I know I told you both about that, so hopefully you'll get to join in the festivities. And I will actually be down later in the afternoon too, so I hope to see you all there. The other date that I need to mention to everyone is Saturday, October 1st. That will be when we invite all of our residents from this year and the public back to Matfield Green. And we're having another day, a full day of events, starting with community open studios in the morning, 10 a.m. to noon. And then in the afternoon, we'll have artist talks at the School for Rural Culture and Creativity there in town. We'll have a dinner served in the gymnasium that is sourced from local producers. It's gonna be delicious. And then we'll end the day with a bonfire at Bill's place. So it's another very exciting day that you don't want to miss if you can make it. That's all I have for today. Ahimsa, thank you so much for sharing your work with us. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Been a pleasure. Many blessings. Thank you.
Thanks.